Feel the burn, no pain, no gain. These are all statements focused on the intensity of your exercise. It is not necessary and in many cases can be harmful to overdo it. The two questions you need to ask are, what fuel am I using and how hard is my heart working? The fuel is especially important if you are overweight, have metabolic syndrome, or diabetes. And since your heart is an aerobic muscle, it is also relevant to heart disease. The next step is to estimate the intensity that takes you from aerobic to anaerobic exercise. This is called the anaerobic threshold. It is the point where your breathing is no longer able to remain steady. By using the target heart rate method, for most people this is a range between 60 and 90% of your heart rate range. It'll be closer to 90% for an athlete and closer to 60% for a sedentary person. 75 is a good target for most of us, and the goal is to train just under this number. And since your heart is an aerobic muscle, it is better to err on the side of being a little bit too low. Well, first let's talk about the fuels. Have you ever noticed that right after exercise, some people have an energy boost and move right into the next activity, while others need to have a snack and take a nap? The reason for this is that your body uses two primary fuels during physical activity, fat and carbohydrate. At rest and low intensity activity, fat is the primary fuel. As you increase your intensity, you start burning more and more carbohydrate. For metabolic and cardiovascular fitness, lower intensity exercises that burns primarily fat is the best. Higher intensity exercise that results in burning carbohydrates can result in a drop in blood sugar, resulting in fatigue and hunger. Well, let's talk first about the target heart rate. The target heart rate is a good way to know that your exercise is safe and effective. It is also the best way to tell how hard your heart is working, so it is the preferred method for anyone with heart disease. The first step is to determine what your maximum heart rate is, and it can be done two ways. It can be calculated or estimated as 220 minus your age, or it can be the max heart rate achieved on your stress test. Anybody that takes medicine that will affect your heart rate must use the rate achieved on the stress test. The 220 minus your age will probably not be very accurate. The formula then for the target heart rate is to take your maximum heart rate minus your resting heart rate and multiply that number by a range of between 60 and 90%. And then of course you must add back in the resting heart rate. So let's use an example. Let's say your age is 60 years. So that would give you a maximum heart rate of 220 minus 60, or a maximum heart rate of 160. Let's say, for easy math, that your resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute. So to calculate the low end of the range, you would take the 100 times 60%, or 0.6, and that would give you 60 beats. Adding back in the resting would give you a low end range of 120 beats per minute. The high end would be the same thing, 100 beats times 90%, or 90. Adding back into the 60 would give you a high end range of 150 beats per minute. And then to calculate your target heart rate, 75% of that would be 135. So a good range for this person may be between 130 and 140 beats per minute. So to do your target heart rate, you must know how to calculate your pulse. It is important for you to learn to take your pulse accurately. The pulse should be taken using the index and middle finger, not your thumb. There is a small pulse in your thumb as well. And use the minimum amount of pressure necessary to detect a pulse. Count every beat you feel for 10 seconds and multiply that number by 6 to convert it to beats per minute. When should you check your pulse? You should check your pulse before you exercise, and you should take an exercise heart rate either during or immediately after your exercise, or after you've stopped exercise. Your heart rate drops rapidly, therefore it is essential to take your count immediately after you stop. And you should also take a recovery heart rate between 5 and 15 minutes after your exercise to make sure that your pulse rate has gone down to normal. The two best places to calculate your heart rate are your radial and carotid pulse. Your radial pulse is located on the thumb side of your palm at the break in your wrist. Use the tips of your index and middle finger, slide them down in thumb to a point just past the break in your wrist, and press gently. You should feel a gentle pulsation against your fingers. If you use the carotid pulse, which is found in your neck, it's found just to either side of your Adam's apple or your voice box in your neck. Use the tips of your index and middle finger to find your Adam's apple, and then slide your fingers toward the outside of your neck into the groove. You should feel a pulsation. Use your right hand for the right side of your neck and the left hand for the left side of your neck. And again, once you feel the pulse, then back away so that you don't overdo it and occlude that blood vessel. The next technique is called your perceived exertion. So while target heart rate can be useful, it can be just as effective to listen to your body and to listen to clues for how hard you perceive that you are working. We use a range from 0 to 10. 0 means you're doing absolutely no work at all. 10 is complete and total exhaustion. And our goal with perceived exertion is to be somewhere between a 3 and a 5, which is a brisk to a somewhat hard. Basically, the intensity that you feel when you're out on a good power walk is a good way to judge this. And what you might want to do is combine these efforts, do perceived exertion as well as taking your pulse. And eventually you'll figure out what exertion level is necessary to get to a certain heart rate range for you. The next one is called the talk test. The term aerobic means with oxygen, or aerobic. Aerobic is steady state breathing. So basically, if you cannot hold a conversation while you're exercising, you are not in a steady state. Try walking up a couple flights of stairs and then holding a conversation with somebody, and you'll get what I'm talking about. The next way to do it is with your workload. We have many exercise machines now will calculate your METs. A MET is the metabolic equivalent, and 1 MET is the amount of energy you expend at rest. So a calculated MET is the multiple of your resting energy level. So for example, if your treadmill is telling you that you're walking at 5 METs, that means you're at 5 times your resting energy level. Now treadmills are pretty accurate. Some exercise modalities, especially elliptical climbers, may be over or underestimating your MET level. So again, you'll have to go back and use your heart rate and perceived exertion techniques as well. But the goal by using METs is to work out at about 50% of your maximum MET level. Again, that would have been determined on your stress test. So you'll impress your doctor if you ask your doctor how many METs you did on your stress test.